Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Obviously, some massive news for the USC fans coming late Wednesday night. Bear Alexander will redshirt the rest of the 2024 year, hit the transfer portal at the end of the year. At the end of the day, he's not going to play any more football for USC on the football field in 2024. I hopped on late last night, kind of gave you guys my personal reaction and personal take on the situation, a lot of which you guys agreed with in the comment section. But I kind of got to thinking, that's not that productive of a conversation to have. Like, I don't think it matters how we feel about Bear Alexander leaving this football team. I think the more important conversation is, what does the defensive line look like for USC going forward in 2024? At the end of the day, you didn't lose some sort of game wrecking interior defensive lineman to the transfer portal. Like, you lost a rotational piece on the inside of the defensive line. And although he wasn't a game wrecker, a starter for USC, he was the third most snaps on the inside of the defensive line for USC, a key rotational player for USC on the defensive line. Who needs to step up to kind of replace the snaps that Bear Alexander was getting in the 2024 season? That's the conversation that I think is much more important to have. I got three names I want to talk about, but I also want to just talk about what the defensive line rotation will look like post Bear Alexander leaving this program. Fired up to get into it. Now, before we do, and as always, to the USC fans, y'all know it's a program I love talking about. I say it all the time. I can't thank you guys enough for all the support y'all show the boys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, but much more importantly, we're going to talk about three names. Would love to hear the name, just one name out of the three that you think kind of steps up in Bear Alexander's absence. Throw it in the comments section. I'm kind of just interested to gauge what the USC fan base is kind of thinking on this defensive line rotation. And without further ado, let's get into it. I think we got to start with what the defensive line rotation looked like before Bear Alexander left, where it was clear your two starters were Nate Clifton and Gavin Mayer, who were both playing very good football. Like, you talk about Coach Henny, Coach Dan Lynn, they're some of the best in the business at what they do. They're gonna play the football players that give USC the best chance to have the best defense on Saturdays. We saw that. Like, it is very clear that this USC defense is significantly better than it was in 2023. And I think most importantly, it's not necessarily box score statting. It's very easy to just look at the box scores and kind of assume who's a good player, who's not a good player. What I'm most fascinated in is, although guys like Nate Clifton and Gavin Mayer, they're not lighting up the box score. Who is lighting up the box score? It's guys like Eric Gentry. It's guys like Mason Cobb and Easton Mascarenas Arnold. The linebacker play has been significantly better than it was in 2023. Now, yes, I think that has to do with a massive upgrade in the coaching staff, but I also think it has a lot to do with this defensive line, although not being super productive on the box score, doing a really good job to gap and keeping those linebackers clean and allowing them to come downhill and make plays. So although you look at the box score and say, well, Nate Clifton, Gavin Mayer, they're not lighting up the box score, they've been allowing guys like Eric Gentry to have the year that they are having. So you had Nate Clifton, excuse me, and Gavin Mayer, two undersized defensive linemen, just absolutely going to war on the inside of the defensive line. Those are going to be your starters. You can kind of expect both of them to play probably 35 to 45 snaps per game, kind of based on how the game goes and what the time possession looks like. Now, the question is, Bear Alexander was kind of that third rotational guy along with Kobe Pepe. I think most teams want to have at least six interior defensive linemen that they feel comfortable playing and rotating. So without Bear Alexander, I think Kobe Pepe's snaps go up. He's played 55 snaps throughout the first three games. He's probably going to be that third guy in the rotation, especially at that nose spot where Kobe Pepe's given some really good reps for USC. That's probably been the biggest surprise for me personally on the USC defensive line is, look, Kobe Pepe was not even an impact guy for the duration of his time at USC. Coach Henny gets here and Coach Sean knew they're doing a really good job with him. Like, he's all of a sudden been a really, really important contributor to the defensive line. So we kind of had four guys playing the bulk of the snaps on the inside of the defensive line. You lose one in Bear Alexander. Who's the one that kind of takes the place? I think it's going to be Devin Tompkins, who's played 30 snaps through the first three games. Or How much can Devin Tompkins play? We all kind of know he's an undersized defensive lineman, but I think the beauty of this is outside of Kobe Pepe, like Nate Clifton, Gavin Mayer, they're both undersized too. Neither of them are going over 300 pounds, but they're giving you some big time reps on the inside of the defensive line. So if I were to guess, Devin Tompkins is probably the main contributor that fills in for the void that Bear Alexander brings. But you got three other names that I'm really intrigued by, and I want to start with defensive lineman Elijah Hughes, who has probably just been another surprise for me in terms of the lack of playing time and burn that he's gotten throughout the first couple of games. You look at Elijah Hughes kind of emerged as a rotational piece on the inside of the defensive line as a true freshman last year, where it was pretty clear that Elijah Hughes was not quite ready to play consistently at the Power 5 level on the line of scrimmage. He was an undersized guy, probably was playing around 275, 280 pounds soaking wet, but he always played with really good effort. I thought he was tough as nails on the inside, and I kind of assumed that another kind of full off season for Elijah Hughes, you would get, I thought, potentially a starter for USC on the defensive line. Now, that hasn't necessarily panned out. I think it's kind of the conversations, hey, ready or not, Elijah Hughes is going to have to play for USC in some capacity over the next couple of weeks. I think he's ready. I mean, you go back to this kid coming out of high school, 113 tackles, 24 and a half sacks senior year. Again, you kind of knew he would take some time and some seasoning to kind of get that power 5 body to play in the inside of the defensive line. He's not necessarily the tallest at 6'3", probably not even 6'3", but he plays with really good pads. He's quick, kind of going across the line of scrimmage. He'd probably be my main pick to get an increased workload in the absence of Bear Alexander. The other two guys I want to talk about are true freshmen. Let's start with Jide Abasiri, who you got to give a ton of credit for Coach Wiley in the weight room. This kid came into USC as, a little bit of a product or project, I should say, from the state of Minnesota. We broke it down when he committed to USC about 8 months ago in December of last year, saying this kid's freaky. Like the physical traits that this kid has, the size, the length, it's special, but he's a little bit of a project, probably not a year one ready guy. Well, he's got the frame to be a year one guy. I mean, at 6'5, 295 plus pounds, I know every USC fan that's listening to this has seen the pictures of a guy like G-Day. I think he's physically ready. Now I think it has a lot more to do with, is he technically ready to go play? Because you go back to the high school film, was a lot of reliance on just being bigger, stronger, faster. And the guys up in Minnesota that were trying to block him, he'd probably be the guy that I look to next. He was in for all of the winter and spring. He's the guy that probably is kind of next in line after Elijah Hughes. And then the last one you got to talk about is Carlin Jones, who I think had a more year one ready body, but he wasn't in for spring practice. He was a late enrollee. He was a summer enrollee for USC. And then he's also been dealing with an injury. You look at this kid, 6'2", 310, just an absolute fire hydrant, thick lower half. I think from a physical standpoint, and Coach Henney said this, or I think it was Coach Nua who said this in a press conference, saying, hey, a lot about being a defensive lineman is just power output. Like, are you just strong and physical enough to handle yourself on the defensive line? Carlin Jones is that guy. Now he's coming off an injury. I believe he was in a walk-in boot for the last couple of weeks. So is he physically ready to go against Wisconsin? I would be surprised if he plays a ton, right? He's probably got to get a little bit more conditioning and kind of get used to the physicality once again. Again, he's still a true freshman. So if I were to guess who the guys are going into Wisconsin, it'd probably be Elijah Hughes and G-Day that have to step up, along with Devin Tompkins. But you talk about 3 to 4 weeks down the road, as Carlin Jones gets his feet back under him from the injury, I'd probably be looking at Carlin Jones. That's going to be my biggest thing that I'm looking for USC against Wisconsin on Saturday, is what does that defensive line rotation look like? I'm guessing you'll ask Nate Clifton and Gavin Mayer to probably play a little bit more. Now, I think a caveat there is they're both kind of smaller guys. They're probably in better shape than the 320-pound interior defensive linemen that we see other schools have. So they're probably capable of playing more snaps than a guy like Kenneth Graham from Michigan. And so I think that's one thing to note, is how much do they push Nate Clifton and Gavin Mayer to stay on the football field? And then what does that rotation look like after Kobe Pepe coming in? Wouldn't be surprised if USC goes to that 3-man rotation and try to make do against Wisconsin with those three guys. I think secondly that helps him is if you're concerned about stopping the run, you can just do what USC did against Michigan. Play the five-man front, walk your safeties in the box, have three linebackers on the field because, yeah, Michigan couldn't really test you in the secondary. I quite frankly don't think Wisconsin is doing that much testing you in the secondary either, going to their backup quarterback. So I do think it's a decent game for USC to kind of figure out what they got on the inside of the defensive line, figure out what this rotation looks like. And look, again, at the end of the day, Coach Henny, Coach Lynn, they know a ton more than us. They're way better about defense than I am. The reason I'm just sitting here in my basement talking about it. Um, I trust Coach Henny and trust Coach Lynn to get the best players on the football field. That's what they've been doing the first couple of weeks. It's obviously been working. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. What name out of Elijah Hughes, G-Day, and Carlin Jones do you think step up for this USC program? Again, appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.